Welcome back to the channel. I cannot believe that this is the first video on the Rugby Championship that I am doing this season, and because of that I have to start this video with an apology. Regular viewers of the channel may well have noticed that I haven't been posting as regularly, and it was simply a case of just being so busy with work I didn't get round to it. It was one of those things that slipped off, so I do apologise if those of you have been looking at the channel or looking in your feeds and wondering where on earth the videos had been. But I am back now. This is going to be the start of hopefully posting more regularly. Not hopefully, I will be posting more regularly. Yeah, it was so busy that it just got to a point where something had to give, and unfortunately the videos were it. So welcome back to the channel to all of you. I have genuinely missed doing them, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck in this video to a bit of the Rugby Championship, because I haven't really covered the fact that Argentina had that massive win in New Zealand, the fact that the Springboks have had back-to-back wins over the Wallabies, and all the various bits and bobs in between. And given that now we've had 2 fixtures, we've had a little break in the competition, I thought it would be a good opportunity to ponder some of the questions so far. So as I say, welcome back. If you are here clicking on the video, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and also if you like this video as well. I'm going to run through each team, go through a few questions or a few points, a few things that interest me. The comment section is where you can have your say on anything that really stands out to you for these 4 teams from what you've seen in the Rugby Championship so far this season. I think there's a few pretty interesting storylines. I want to chat with South Africa because, as I say, they've gone 2 from 2 against the Wallabies, as they might be expected to do, but also in pretty comprehensive style. For the most part, it was a mismatch, these 2 games. We'll get on to Australia in a minute, and that it's maybe a reflection of where they are. I suppose with the Boks, my big question is this now Sasha Feinberg Mngozulu's time? There's been so much chat about him, the way in which he has burst onto the scene this year, making his debut. He looks so comfortable at test level. He's starting for the Springboks in some massive fixtures, and it's off the back of obviously doing the business in the URC. He has been thought of very highly in South Africa for a long time. But is this now his time? I'm fascinated by what the team selection is going to be for a couple of weekends' time when they face New Zealand in South Africa. Is he given the opportunity to run that team, or is it going to be Pollard? A bit like what we saw last year when Manie Libbok had done a pretty good job, a great job in some instances of being the fly half for that team, but when it came down to the business end, it was Pollard that was relied upon in those crunch games at the end of the World Cup. Or has Feinberg Mngozulu done enough that it is now his time? It hasn't all been perfect as well. I know in the match at the weekend, there are a few, kind of the odd moment where he made a few little mistakes here and there. That's to be expected, 22-year-old, test debut this year. But is it now his team for the big games? I suppose that is the question. We know he is going to continue to feature, continue to get opportunities. They will look to develop him, I've got no doubt, in the next couple of years and building ahead for the next World Cup. But right here and now, has he done enough that he is the guy? He is the starting fly half. That for me is the really fascinating question with the Springboks, because I would expect, for the most part, in the rest of their team, Rassie Erasmus to go back to the normal front row pairing, the second row pairings, even the back row to a degree, although I know we've seen some movement there. I think for the most part it will be a Springbok side that looks pretty familiar. Is fly half for that game against New Zealand going to be the difference? And I suppose, speaking of the New Zealand game, that's where I'm interested for how well has this Australia, a couple of tests against Australia, prepared them for facing New Zealand in terms of where they are. I look at South Africa this year, and it hasn't been perfect, has it? It's kind of like they won 1 test against Ireland, but even in that game, I know a lot of Springbok fans felt like they left opportunities out there. They then lost the second test. What an unbelievable finishing game that was. They've got 2 wins against Australia without being perfect. So the good, I think, is that they're winning, and in some instances they're winning quite comfortably against Australia. The bad is maybe a question of just why aren't they fully hitting their straps? Some new players coming in, the team being rotated. What exactly is that? And the reason for that? And actually, I suppose you would say any other team in the world at the moment would be absolutely delighted to be sat here today where the South Africa are at this stage of their season. But I guess when you're the back-to-back world champs, you get judged by a slightly different and higher standard. So let me know, Springbok fans. Let's move on to New Zealand, because the honeymoon is over. That 38-30 defeat to Argentina. But they bounced back brilliantly, as they so often do. Like the accuracy and the skill level of their game, I thought, against Argentina at the weekend, to win comfortably, to rack up the score early, was seriously impressive. What will be a concern, I think, is in that defeat, the power game. And I think they were on the wrong end of that. I know they made some changes for the game last weekend. It shored up the scrum, which looked pretty strong. So in the same way that I'm interested to what South Africa's team selection looks like for the game against the All Blacks, what I'm interested from an All Blacks perspective is how good is this team? We saw them beat England twice, 2 games that a lot of England fans felt was a real missed opportunity to win in New Zealand. We've seen them lose a game to Argentina, and then we've seen them bounce back. All Blacks fans, how impressed have you been with the team? On the whole, I actually have to say I've been pretty impressed with them, because I think we forget the amount of change there's been in the team. Some of the big players they lost in terms of experience at the end of the World Cup. Some of the changes in terms of Richie Mo'unga no longer being there. So Damian McKenzie, I know, he's just class, isn't he? Like, he is blockbuster. But he's had the opportunity to run the ship from fly half rather than it being Mo'unga. We've seen TJ Perenara return to the team, again a key position at scrum half. I think you're starting to see the emergence of an Ethan Blackadder. I was quite impressed with him over the weekend as well. So my point with New Zealand is, despite the quality they still have, there have been major changes. And actually maybe 3 wins out of 4 at home is a decent return. And they're in a pretty good position. We'll find out exactly what sort of position they're in when they face South Africa. Those 2 tests coming up are going to be brilliant. It's going to be absolutely fascinating, I think, to see exactly where they are and how their game matches up in terms from a power point of view, because I think South Africa will go back to that. As I said earlier, I think the Stephen Kitsoffs and Frans Malherbs and all those big frontline players for the power game they want to implement will come in. How do New Zealand deal with that, particularly after some of what we saw certainly in the defeat to Argentina, and even some of what we saw in the England series as well? On to the Wallabies. I mentioned them in their defeats to South Africa. I really want the Joe Schmidt era to be successful. I'm bored of Australia just not being that great. Of just almost being a bit vanilla, not doing too much, not getting too many notable results. They might get a close game here and there against the top side, but I'm bored of them not being as good as they once were. And also, for the sport as a whole globally, I want Australia to have a strong team. It makes it so much more interesting, so much more exciting. So I really want it to work. The question with them is just, are they good enough, I suppose? Now, for years now, going back to kind of Dave Rennie towards the end of his tenure, I remember seeing a lot of Australia on their Northern tour under Dave Rennie. And I really believed that you could see the talent they had there, the way in which they were trying to build it. Then obviously the Eddie Jones second stint happened and was a complete and utter disaster, and they're kind of going back to square one here. And you look at so many of the players and the depth in that team, and my question is, are they good enough? I still think they are, but it's just tough, isn't it? For Wallabies fans, it's kind of like, how long do you have to wait before you're going to see some sort of reward for what has now been years and years of poor performances, of not particularly good teams? And I suppose on the topic of performances, how does this Australia team need to play and implement itself? I think they've tried to strip the game plan back. It's what we've seen other teams do previously when they haven't been playing well. Try and get your fundamentals, become a team that is harder to beat rather than a side that really goes out and hurts sides. And in a lot of ways, that makes a lot of sense. I just wonder, with the squad that this Australia side has, with what are the natural strengths most often you would suggest from Wallabies teams, whether they need to try and be a little bit more expansive. But having said that, their maul defence, for example, has looked rubbish. I mean, it was rubbish against Wales in the tests they played in the summer. It hasn't looked good against the Springboks, who are much stronger up front than Wales. So that is an area of the game that needs to improve. And maybe I've contradicted myself. Maybe that's exactly why they're stripping the game plan back and trying to nail down some of those fundamentals and improve them. But I just find it hard with Australia. I find it hard. I find it hard just kind of sitting here and saying, let's be patient, it will come. They've got some talent there, it's a new coaching regime. Yeah, I'm in a weird place for Australia of how exactly to analyse them. I really hope it works. Let's see how they get on against Argentina. I think that'll give us a pretty good indication. As for the Argentinians, brilliant win. They're capable of it, aren't they? Like over the last few years, we've seen Argentina produce some really noteworthy, historic results. They've had a couple now in New Zealand and against the All Blacks. They won away at Twickenham towards the end of the Eddie Jones era. This is a team that is able, on their day, almost to beat anyone. The problem is always backing it up, isn't it? Which is what they weren't able to do this weekend. In the same way that New Zealand are able to bounce back, it's Argentina being able to back it up. And when I was thinking about this, I was kind of like, should I just be pleased with where Argentina are? Like, you look at the structure of the rugby in the country, the resources available, the fact that basically all of their top players have to go overseas to play there. A lot of things that aren't going their way. And for them to be in a position where they have now won a couple of times over the last few years in New Zealand against New Zealand, they should be given huge credit for that. Or are we right to demand more? Let me know what you make of it. But I think it's been a really good start to the Contaponi era. Like, they've got a really nice balance, I think, of power and excitement in the backs. Like, some of their backs are unbelievable, as well as a back row that is as mean and bruising as anyone else. I like where this Argentina team are. Looking at 2 tests against Australia, should that be 2 wins for them? Like, if Argentina are really looking at themselves and saying, all right, we know we can go toe-to-toe with all these teams. We know we can beat certainly most of these teams. South Africa might be a different prospect, but they know they can beat New Zealand. They know absolutely they can beat Australia. They beat them in Australia last year in this competition. Now they need to go 2 from 2 against them. Get more comfortable with being the favourites. That's something that I think with Argentina they're always uncomfortable with. I look back on the opening game of the World Cup. I was in Marseille. What an unbelievable weekend that was, by the way, just to chuck that in. Those 2 games, because it was South Africa-Scotland the next day. But that nighttime game in Marseille, packed out crowd, England in a disastrous place heading into the World Cup. A lot of people thinking Argentina may be favourites for this game. England get a red card early and England control the game. It felt like an Argentina team that were almost uncomfortable being the favourites and being in that sort of position. They need to get more comfortable at that. Let's see if they can back it up against the Wallabies. I'll leave it there. Those are some of my general thoughts. What do you make of it? The Rugby Championship, the questions so far. Put them in the comments section. Whilst you're here as well, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And a final apology for how long it has been since I've done videos. We are back. I will be uploading more regularly. It's great to be back with you. See you in the next one.